Saturday. It's Saturday and it's cold. Oh, it's been colder. But deer season is over. And I am home alone. Doing what I do. And what I do seems to not sit well with some folks. That's neither here nor there. I want to know, where are the preachers? Where are those that preach for God? I don't have a problem finding somebody preaching, but the ones I find preaching are not preaching for God. Most of them are preaching for money. And some are preaching and gaining fame. And others, I really don't know what they do. But I know I can read about some preachers. You say, well, what preacher was the first one you read about? I don't know. Let's just think about Noah might have been a preacher. I mean, old Noah was pretty old. He's a lot older than I am. And God told him to build a boat. And I'm sure that people, saw him working on this wood and putting this big thing together. And I'm just sure that Noah was a preacher. And I bet he was preaching. And as soon as he got that boat built, I bet those folks, when those animals went to go into that boat, they went to wondering, why are the animals going to the boat? Anyway, the boat got filled up and the door got shut and the rains came down. Wasn't nobody left around when the water went away. They were gone, gone, gone. The wicked were not there when the water went away. They were gone. There was another preacher one day, and I'm going to just call this preacher's name Moses. And old Moses had it in his mind to help some folks. I mean, some folks was being mistreated terribly by some Egyptians. And Moses came one day and he kind of gave him a little message. And anyway, the next thing you know, Moses is running. He's leaving country. He don't have nobody going with him. But he winds up at a good place, you understand. He gets a wife and some kids. I'm sure he got a wife. And anyway, Moses ran into when he was out there, he came upon a burning bush. And boy, that burning bush really fixed him up. But anyway, Moses was a preacher. And he was good at preaching. Now, he wasn't the last good preacher. But because there were some more good preachers showed up. And I believe, how about Isaiah? Isaiah was a preacher. Ezekiel was a preacher. Jeremiah was a preacher. I know these preachers preached a long time ago, and you can read a little bit of stuff that they, that they brought out and made clear to some folks. And anyway, there was another preacher one day, and that preacher got a little bit, I think he was bald-headed or something. And some kids were doing, just being kids. And that man, that bald-headed man, whatever he said, it brought the bears out of the woods, or a bear out of the woods. Anyway, it wasn't good for the kids. Not when that bear showed up. These things really happened, folks. There was a flood, and some wicked folks went away. And there were some kids out there that day on that mountain talking about that bald-headed man. And anyway, it didn't go too good for them. Well, anyway, later on there was another man. He came and he was a preacher too. Yep, that was John. John would preach. He wouldn't just preach. He would put people in the river. And then he would tell them things. He would tell them things like, this is what you need to do. And he did that for a while, and one day he saw the king, had this woman that really loved him, that wasn't supposed to be loving him at all. And she got a little girl. And the king had a party one day, and the king got a little drunk. The girl did some dancing. The king made some statements. Mama found out. Well, they had the preacher in prison. Done locked him up. His name was John. Next thing you know, John had his head off. I don't know what she did with his head, but I know some disciples got his body. And I'm sure he got buried. But there was another preacher that was preaching when all this was going on too. And every time he went to preaching, somebody got mad. Somebody wanted him dead. He just kept preaching. They couldn't kill him. He couldn't be killed until a certain day arrived. Yep, the day arrived that he could be killed. But before he got killed, he rode into town. And there was a pretty good parade going on that day. Yeah, y'all ought to read about some of this stuff. How preachers that preach, they are not liked by some while they loved by others. Yep. Jesus preached till he couldn't preach anymore. He had preached all his Father wanted him to preach. And after he had preached all his Father wanted him to preach, he said, I finished preaching. And he said, now let's see what happens. Well, anyway, they crucified that preacher, but his daddy raised him from the dead. And before he got raised from the dead, Jesus had already made quite a few statements. And every one of those statements he made, he got every bit of the information from God. I expect in the next, probably today or tomorrow, you might better find you a preacher that preaches what God says. Because them that don't, won't, and they probably won't ever preach what God says. Anyway, that's what I said this morning.